was introduced to Christ in the Baptist church, and that was through my paternal grandparents. And then when my family moved to Texas when I was 5, we joined a Lutheran church. And I remained there until I was 12. I was baptized in the Lutheran faith. And then I was unchurched. Then my adolescent from about 12 until in my early 20s. And then in my early 20s, I returned to the Baptist church. Now I was never outside of a relationship with God. We just didn't attend church anymore. There was no real reason that we stopped going. Life just got busy and that kind of thing. But in our home, we still practiced Christian beliefs. My parents still instilled those values in us. We just no longer attended church. So my relationship with God was one of those on an as-needed basis kind of thing. It was very, very immature, and I often say when I was 16, I learned that Jesus was my Savior, but the Lord part came a lot later. So I became a mom and a wife really, really young. And during that period of time, about a 5-year period of time with the first marriage, I prayed probably more than I ever did because it was a difficult time. There was still no church attendance, but there was definitely a longing for God. And that marriage ended in divorce. I had 2 children. And then when my current husband, Scott, we've been married for 33 years. When we began to date, the very first thing he asked me was I a Christian? And so I knew there was something different there. And that began a new journey of faith for me. Once again, we did not attend church on a regular basis until I decided I wanted to. I wanted to go back to my Baptist roots. And Scott was raised Presbyterian, so he wasn't too excited about that until he met the preacher, Sonny. And he loved Sonny. And so we faithfully attended a Baptist church for many, many years after that. So very much like my upbringing, when our children got to a certain age and life got busy, church attendance began to wane a little bit. And we didn't go as faithfully. But my oldest daughter, who was 18 at the time, she was in her own search for God and truth and what church. And she began attending a church with a neighbor, a good friend of ours. And it was a United Pentecostal church. And when that happened, at the time, I didn't really know what the United Pentecostal Church was. I knew that my friend and I disagreed on a lot of things, but I didn't think it was that important. But when my daughter joined that church, then it became very important for me to understand what they believed. And once I learned what they believed, it just became my life's passion to pull my daughter back from things that I thought were harmful to her. And this led to a lot of study, a lot of prayer, and my discovery that there was a lot of division within the Christian church. And that caused a real problem for me because I had no way of discerning who was right. Gretchen and I, this is my friend, we would pore over the same scriptures, praying together, and we would still come to very different conclusions. And so I knew something was very wrong. So that began a search for me, looking for the true church. And how would I know it when I found it? So after it had been probably about a year that I had been not really debating with my friend, we would just discuss our differences. We puzzled over how we could be so opposed. We talked about what other people believed. You know, I had a little bit of a Lutheran background, so I did a little, research into that and discovered, because I was a child when we left and I couldn't really remember. So when I discovered some of the things they believed, I shared those with her and I said, now look, this is completely different than you and me. And we had a friend who was a Church of Christ pastor. So what did he believe? Yet again, something different. So I was pretty exhausted by the search and finally I realized there was no way for me to know. And one morning I just knelt down and prayed just the most sincere, desperate prayer of submission I think I've ever prayed in my life. And it was another strong conversion, just like I had when I was 16, a desire for God. And I just begged him, just told him, please, God, just remove everything I think I know and show me your truth. And I even said to him, even if it's that Pentecostal church, I'll go. That very night, I happened upon a television show. I'd never been on this station before. And at the bottom of the screen, it said, "The Way to Follow Jesus." And I thought, well, okay, I'll watch. Turns out it was EWTN. And then it was probably 2 weeks after that, I got back on that station because I couldn't sleep one night and I wondered what the Catholics were doing. And so I turned it back on, and it was an episode of The Journey Home. So I continued watching the Journey Home episodes. And the first full episode I ever watched was the story of a Southern Baptist minister who had become Catholic. And so, of course, that really interested me. And the more I watched, the more I learned. I learned about these men called the early church fathers that I had never heard of before. So I bought books and read, and then I heard this man's name, Scott Hahn, repeated many times. So I bought his books, entered RCIA, and 2 short years later, I became Catholic. And the reason I became Catholic was what I realized was what I was missing. When I said, what's the truth and how do we know? The reason I felt that way is because there was no authority. I had no authority. It was just me and my Bible. It was just my friend and her Bible, my Lutheran minister and his Bible, and so forth and so on. We had no authority. We had no ultimate authority, and it's why we were so divided. And the Catholic Church was the first actual answer I got to why are we divided and what do we do about it?